KPRL presents Sound Off, the longest-running radio talk show in San Luis Obispo County. Sound Off on the North County's choice for local talk, KPRL. The views and opinions expressed on Sound Off do not necessarily reflect those of KPRL, its management, staff, or sponsors.
Sound Off on AM 1230, KPRL, and 99.3 FM is brought to you by Davis Body Shop, your auto collision specialist in Paso, Robles, and Atascadero.
This is Sound Off, where the North County comes to talk on The Right Choice, KPRL.
Good afternoon and welcome to Sound Off. I'm Dick Mason, and my guest this afternoon is Michael Rivera, who is running for mayor in the city of Paso Robles. So welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dick, for inviting me.
You're welcome. So what inspired you to run for mayor?
Well, there was several things that happened that, I had thought about it for some time. However, I didn't really feel compelled until some actions that were being done that actually didn't happen. And it had to do with crime. It had to do with crime in our city. And I got to tell you, Dick, when the Tree of Life was attacked and there was no response out of the mayor's office, I thought that was no good. Crime is a big deal. And I don't care what your position is on abortion or whatever. If that would, even though I don't agree with Planned Parenthood, if that would have happened to a Planned Parenthood facility, I would have been outraged just as much. We cannot allow criminals to basically try to intimidate our city. And when Steve Martin wrote to me and said that he had been in touch with the Tree of Life, and I found out that was not true, and that he wouldn't have a statement, that was strike one. So that was a big push for me to say, you know what, this is nonsense. We need to stand up for our institutions and our people. And then when the whole issue of the cannabis retail market came to light, my grandnephew just he died about 8 months ago. He smoked some fentanyl laced marijuana, and he was a good kid and he didn't deserve to die. And so when I found that we were going to open up this can of worms in a city, you see, you can get cannabis delivered to you, so we don't have a problem here. I don't know why we're opening this can of worms. There's too much at stake. Our kids are they've got too much on their plate already, and we're going to go ahead and open up that can of worms. I'm totally opposed to that.
And you're talking about opening retail stores for the sale of cannabis for recreation use in the city of Paso Robles.
Correct. And that, in my view, as I said, it's not needed. We're opening a can of worms. The cannabis today is very powerful. It affects developing minds in a very significant negative way. And I think that we haven't had the conversation here either with our schools, who I mentioned this to, God, it's been 4 years, that we really needed to start educating our children as to the impacts of how these drugs can affect them and in a developing brain, and the new danger of fentanyl in the system. And so it's a very dangerous time. We don't need to open up that can of worms for our young people in this city.
Backing up a little bit, your own background, you've lived on the Central Coast for a few decades.
50 years, sir.
50 years. And you say mostly doing business here in the North County.
I've done a lot of business in San Luis and northern Santa Barbara County. My wife and I raised our kids in Santa Maria Valley. So therefore, I know what not to do as far as policies go. And we have spent the rest of that period of time here in Paso Robles, so about half and half.
And you've always had a rather strong stand on immigration.
I have, because we're witnessing in today's society, I think, what happened as some people basically saying, oh, we care, we want to help these people, blah, 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 at our border. Now it's turned into complete lawlessness. And if we look throughout our communities, throughout the state of California, what do we see? lawlessness. We have to have if we don't have borders, we don't have a country. And we need to stand up and say, I don't care where you're from. If you come here legally with respect for our country, and this has been my position for 35 years, then welcome. It's a wonderful place to come. But if you come here and thumb your nose at our immigration laws, that's a problem. And furthermore, I was the one who really pushed to try to get SB 54 stopped, and the criminal alien statute that is now California's statute, and we're just giving green lights to criminal aliens to do whatever it is they want, and there is no real pushback. They ought to be deported. They ought to not be allowed to stay within the confines of our country.
Would you agree with the lifeboat analogy that we simply cannot allow everybody into the lifeboat that wants to get in there?
I've said this for years, Dick. The United States is the last great hope for America or for the world as far as freedom and liberty. And if we overwhelm our system, which we're doing right now, in case you haven't been paying attention the last year and a half or so, we're overwhelming our social service infrastructure, our law enforcement infrastructure, so many things. And if you think that can go on in perpetuity, you're wrong. It's going to collapse.
Getting back to city government, one of the challenges for Paso Robles and many cities here in the West Coast is homelessness. How do you feel the city is handling that issue?
That's a great question, because somebody asked me that just a couple of days ago, and I say, there's two parts to this. I think we're trying to put this together in one swell swoop. There's two parts. One of them is our homegrown homelessness, okay? Now, I know for a fact of young people or people who have lived in the riverbed. They've been homegrown here. They are starting to find their way. They've got permanent housing. They've got jobs, and they're trying to find their way back. Then we have those from outside of our area that come here to live in the riverbed and to just basically shoot drugs and do other things, criminal activity that we cannot tolerate. So we have to take them and separate them into two parts. Our homegrown, they're ours. They're on us. We've got to figure out ways to get them back into the mainstream. And I'm all for that. However, the ones who come from outside of our area, who come to live in our riverbed, who we don't know who they are, we don't know what they're doing, we need to take a much different approach and, I believe, repatriate them to the areas in which they came.
Do you feel that law enforcement has a role in the way the homeless issue is handled?
They have to, because, and that's another problem we've got here by taking this in two parts. If we're accepting people from all over the place, counties, states, other cities, and that is costing us a great deal of time, manpower, and money. And it's preventing us from doing the things that our police department needs to do in order to keep the public safe. So and plus, when you look at the first responders, our fire department, it has a great deal to do with taking resources away from them. And you know what, Dick? That's just not fair.
So what about some of the other issues the city has wrestled with? One, we've got the discussion about short-term rentals. Are you pleased with the way the city has handled the licensing of short-term rentals in the city?
It's a very controversial issue. I will say, in full disclosure, my wife and I have a home share. Now, a home share, unlike a non-owner occupied home, a home share allows people to come into your home, and we're on the premises. We do not leave the premises when we have guests. Non-owner occupied issue is a problem because we have people coming here disrupting people's day-to-day activities, the neighbors in the area. I get that, but what we've done is we've tried to reduce the total amount of non-owner occupied rentals and to make it more manageable. And I know it's a controversial issue. I do not in any way, shape, or form think that it's a good thing for anybody to come here and disrupt their neighbors and friends who live around the short-term rentals. And I think that has to be addressed. I think we have addressed it in the ordinance, and I think we need to stay after it to make sure that we make that tight.
What do you think about the parking issue, with particularly downtown Paso Robles?
Oh, my gosh. How long have we been dealing with this? It's just like a never-ending saga. I mean, when are we going to make a decision as to how we should manage this? You know, the good side is we have a lot of demand for our parking downtown. That's good. The bad thing is we haven't developed a really good comprehensive plan on how to address it. Is a parking structure in our future? Possibly. I don't know. Is maybe different ways to get to downtown from all the hotels and so forth a better way? I think that might be something we might want to consider. You know, when we have been dealing with this issue for years, we have spent countless hundreds of thousands of dollars on this problem, and nobody seemed to be able to make a decision on how to come to a conclusion on this. And I think obviously the volume is greater than the parking capacity. So what do you do in that circumstance? You create more parking opportunities.
Some say that the city of Paso Robles is doing too much for tourism and not enough for locals. Would you agree with that?
Thank you. Because I think in this whole time that we've been dealing with this ramp up of tourism and the wine industry, which, by the way, are doing just fine, get out of their way, let them go. They don't need any help. What we need to do is we need to start focusing on Robles, because Robles have been ignored, in my view. Robles have been ignored when it comes to our streets, when it comes to our young people having opportunities for various things, for their parents to be able to provide a good upwardly mobile opportunity for life for their children. I think that we have totally ignored Robles. And one of my biggest things in this campaign is going to be to look for Robles first. Look at Robles' needs first, because Robles have been ignored, and it's time for that to stop.
Have you been out campaigning yourself and talking with people about these different issues?
I talk to people all the time. You know, I'm in the medical industry, as we were chatting about, Dick. I work with orthopedic surgeons and so forth. But I also love, and I do it as a hobby, I drive for Uber and Lyft. And I just have so much. I have done I have met 40,000 people in the last 8 years doing that. And I can tell you right now that I talk to average everyday Roblins, and without question, they are being ignored. And I get a good input into people coming here from other areas from the state, from the country. And I get a real good perspective on what people think. And I'm going to tell everybody something. Everybody wants to move here. And that may not be the best thing in the world to have happen. We've got infrastructure issues here, Dick. We've got serious issues here that have to be addressed, or our quality of life is going to deteriorate for Robles.
Do you think the city leaders, the elected officials and staff are really addressing those infrastructure issues?
I think this has gotten to the point where we need to have all hands on deck, and we need to focus on this. We've got all this development going on the east side, okay? We're starting to see the impacts of that for people getting to the west side. We're starting to see impacts where people are trying to get north and south on the 101. If we don't absolutely make a decision that we're going to fix these infrastructure problems, take a deep breath as it relates to our hospitality business and our wine industry, we need to take a deep breath, slow down, and start taking care of our infrastructure issues. Otherwise, Dick, this is not going to be a very nice place to live going forward, and we can't allow that to happen, and I won't.
In case you just joined us, we're talking to Michael Rivera, who is a candidate for mayor in the city of Paso Robles. Of course, the election coming up in early November. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk more with Michael Rivera. You're listening to Sound Off on AM 1230 KPRL. Back to Sound Off. I'm Dick Mason talking with Michael Rivera, who is candidate for mayor of the city of Paso Robles. We've got a caller, so we'll go to the phone lines. Good afternoon. You're on Sound Off.
Yes, I would just like to agree with the fellow that's running for mayor. Please, God, I hope he gets it. Our daughter lives on the east side of Paso Robles. She was born and raised here. She works in San Luis because it's the only place she can afford to get, the only place she can get a job to live here because she's a single income. It is now taking her as long to get from her house to 101 as it does to get from 101 to the Cuesta Great. That is because they're building more stuff, and we have Niblick Road going to the freeway, and it's backed up clear past Creston Road. Something needs to be done, and I hope this fellow gets on the council and can get it through these thick-headed old men and women that have their heads you know where. I thank you so much for listening to me.
Well, thank you for the call. Good afternoon. You're on Sound Off.
Yes, I agree with most of what Ray has said. I'd like to add a little bit about the parking situation in that I've been a member of Main Street on the board of directors and that, and I went to a presentation in Pleasanton wherein they corrected their employee parking problem by using timed parking. No paid parking, just time parking. I brought that back to the city council. I showed him to them before Julie Dixon came to town. I showed it to them while she was here in town presenting her for the presentation. And they went with the out-of-town, expensive Julie Dixon's Enterprises that has been a complete failure. And I think our city is wasting, they wasted $1 million on that boondoggle, and I can tell you 3 other boondoggles that they've spent money on, including the rerouting of Airport Road is another boondoggle. The rerouting of Vine Street is another boondoggle. They're giving a developer $1 million to build a bridge on his development. How long are we going to support this city council, and especially the mayor, doing this kind of stuff?
All right, Dale, thank you very much for the call. Michael, you want to respond to any of that?
Yes. Here's the issue as I see it. The corporatization of Paso Robles has got to stop. It's got to stop because it is ignoring the needs and common sense answers to Roblin's issues. And if we continue to pour millions of dollars into, as Mr. Gustafson has indicated, boondoggles, and I've seen a few of them, that disturbs me to no end. When we've got Creston Road that has been 4 years ago, we were talking about Creston Road. Nothing's been done there. You've got Commerce Road. It's turning into gravel. I mean, we've got streets right outside of our Robles homes that they go out to and they're falling apart. We have got to focus on our people. We've got to focus on Robles, and we've got to focus on their long-term futures. The corporatization of this city has to stop and allow the corporate entities to do their thing. They don't need our help. We should not be participating in these efforts to try to subsidize them in various ways. And I've spoken about this before. They need to find their own way, and we need to focus on Robles.
We're just about out of time. Any other final thoughts, Mr. Rivera, about your candidacy for mayor of Paso Robles?
If you go to my website, michaelriveraformayor.com, I would appreciate it. Anything, any $10, $20 donations you can give to me, I'd more than appreciate. It takes money to run these campaigns. I've tried to be self-financed, but, sometimes it gets expensive. But beyond that, I want to serve all the people of El Paso de Robles. I want to be a mayor for all the people, and I want to focus on Robles' needs, not the needs of corporate America.
All right, thank you very much. Michael Rivera, candidate for mayor in the city of Paso Robles. Of course, the election coming up November 8th. That's going to wrap it up for this segment of Sound Off. We'll have news and then come back with a feature in just a moment. You're listening to Sound Off on AM 1230 KPRL. The news is next.
This hour of Sound Off on the Right Choice, KPRL, was brought to you by Orange Dot Quilts, now open in Paso Robles on the corner of 10th and Railroad. Just look for the big orange spool of thread.
AM 1230 KPRL, 99.3 FM, KPRL.com, Paso Robles, Atascadero, Templeton.
It's 1 o'clock.